having nothing to do with our personal happiness. Society functions as a massive, indifferent machine, and it blindly sweeps right past all of our individual desires. Most of us are raised as products with a naive hope attached to our potential. The assumption is that by simply growing older, we'll develop the expert decision-making skills needed to navigate a complex life. Our early years are spent mimicking the behaviors, accents, and ideologies of the people around us. We spend over a decade absorbing the specific biases and blind spots of our environment before we ever learn to analyze the information we're taking in. This lack of internal foundation leaves us deeply insecure. We compensate by chasing a box of specialness, relying on constant praise, titles, and attention from others just to feel like we have a right to exist. Relying on the approval of flawed parents and confused strangers creates a psychological cage. It tethers our worth to an external world we can't control, turning us into what the author calls a trapped self. This creates a strange contradiction known as Solomon's paradox. It's the reason why we can give brilliant, rational advice to a friend in crisis, while our own lives remain a complete mess. Analyzing someone else is an objective, logical process, but when we look at our own problems, our vision is immediately clouded by a storm of emotional reactions. Standard introspection usually turns into a loop of emotions reacting to other emotions. We end up judging ourselves or feeling overwhelmed, which prevents us from actually fixing the underlying issues. To gain the clarity we have when helping others, we need a way to look at our internal contents with the cold, detached eye of a mechanic diagnosing a broken engine. Solving the dilemma of the trapped self requires us to borrow that objective lens. We have to find a way to step back far enough that our own identity stops getting in the way of our thinking. Identifying as a singular, emotional self makes every problem feel like a personal attack. To find stability, we need a more structural framework. Imagine your mind isn't a person, but a sovereign nation, a complex geography that requires active governance to function. This country needs a leader. We have to appoint our conscious, objective mind to the executive branch, moving it from a passive observer to the authority responsible for every internal decision. Every nation requires a constitution. These are the personal moral codes and rules you establish for yourself, which take precedence over the arbitrary standards society tried to hand you. Protecting that constitution requires self-control, the internal police force. You use this force to actively suppress self-destructive urges and toxic habits that threaten the peace of the state. You must also account for the opposition party, the ego. This faction is loud, insecure, and obsessed with pride. It is a permanent part of the landscape, so it must be constantly surveilled and never allowed to hold power. Stability is a choice. It's the result of a leader consistently enforcing a constitution against their own internal opposition. Once the nation is stable, we turn to foreign policy. This is the diplomatic strategy for dealing with everyone outside our borders, our friends, family, and romantic partners. Sovereignty depends on boundaries. We have to be willing to distance our nation from any external power that attempts to undermine our internal peace or violate our code. Real diplomacy is built on radical acceptance. Since we cannot change other people, we have to adjust our strategy to the facts of how they actually behave, rather than hoping they'll eventually become who we want them to be. Much of what we call irrational behavior is just biology. When people act destructively, they are often just primates acting on ancient, genetically encoded impulses. A mature foreign policy means observing these primate behaviors with the calm detachment of a scientist in the field. We stop being hurt by unreasonable people when we stop expecting them to be reasonable. The ultimate objective is the well-regulated self. This is a state where the hunger for public status and external validation has been completely removed from the equation. Maintaining this independence requires a harsh mental filter. We have to train ourselves to view external praise as a distraction, something as worthless as debris in the street. We often confuse freedom with the ability to chase every pleasure. In reality, true autonomy is the rigorous discipline of distancing ourselves from those impulses so we can make choices based on reason. The world isn't going to hand you a sense of worth. You have to earn it by governing your own territory with absolute precision. Intellectual freedom begins the moment you stop acting as a product of your environment and start operating as a nation of one.